How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video we're going to talk about the Atlantic hurricane season and the next 3 tropical waves that are going to come off the African coast and determine if one of them has a chance of becoming Tropical Storm Bonnie. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at the water vapor imagery for the entire northern Atlantic, and we do see this area of convection coming off the African coast, which is a little rare for the month of June that we see the possibility of a tropical cyclone developing in the main developed region, but it is possible potentially into next week. We do have some convection going on, and conditions should be somewhat favorable for at least a possibility of tropical cyclone development to occur into next week, right around the main developed region. But you see that it's under, for the most part, a very moist environment. There isn't a lot of dry air surrounding it, so it certainly does have a possibility of getting enough convection to develop into tropical cyclones as it heads further westward. Now, taking a look at the 5-day tropical weather outlook provided from the National Hurricane Center, you see that no new tropical cyclones are expected during the next 5 days. However, I do expect this to change once it becomes a little bit more certain that there is a possibility that a tropical cyclone could develop off of one of these tropical waves, since the time frame of when this tropical storm Bonnie would develop, if it were to develop, is beyond the 5-day point. Of course, it can't be in the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook, but I'm assuming that maybe as early as tomorrow we could see it on the graphical tropical weather outlook once it becomes a little bit more certain that within the 5-day period we could see tropical storm Bonnie, probably closer to the islands of the Caribbean, where it does have a possibility of developing. And in terms of the sea surface temperatures where this tropical wave is at, it's located right around this area at this point, and you see that the sea surface temperatures are more than warm enough to support for tropical cyclone development as this heads further westward, and if it were to stay this far south, which is expected to, as you see that the sea surface temperatures are hovering around 26 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is right around the low to mid 80s. So this could allow for enough convection to occur as a result of the air molecules and the water vapor being a lot less dense, thanks to the warmer temperatures that are pretty much as a direct result of the warmer sea surface temperatures in just south of the main developed region. So the sea surface temperatures won't be much of an inhibiting factor as this continues ahead further westward, assuming this stays far enough south, which at this point is expected to. Now, let's take a look at what the computer models are stating. So taking a look at the GFS model. So let's actually take a look at the precipitation forecast from the GFS model, and if I were to continue to move forward, you see that our first tropical wave is located in this pocket of moisture right here. And if I were to continue to move forward, we do see a little bit of thunderstorm activity occur right around center circulation. It's going to take several days for this tropical wave to really find an area where the most convergence will occur, to the point where all the convergence will focus around one low pressure system rather than multiple areas of low pressure systems. So if I were to continue to move forward, we do see that, well, the GFS model right around the 108-hour mark, which is just before the 5-day mark, the GFS model does develop a well-defined low pressure system. It is fairly weak. It's right around 1,007 millibars, but this certainly does have the possibility of becoming a tropical depression if the pressure were to drop that low, and if we were to see a center circulation that's this well-defined, which is certainly possible. But you see that the GFS model sort of wants to weaken it as this heads further westward, and you see that it could come close to the coast of Venezuela into next week. So you might want to watch out for the possibility of heavy rain for of the northern portion of Venezuela, as well as the islands, as well as the southern islands of the Caribbean. You need to pay close attention to that. But you see that the GFS model wants to dissolve it, but that's not the only tropical wave that's going to come off of Africa, because you see that right behind it, we see another low pressure system come off the African coast, and the GFS model isn't as lenient as strengthening it as the first one, but it's still a low pressure system we need to pay close attention to. And then there's going to be a third tropical wave, which the GFS model doesn't really develop any sort of low area of low pressure system associated with this moisture. But as for the third tropical cyclone, the computer models are leaning towards it moving a little bit northward, but at this point I'm going to the 270 hour mark, so still highly uncertain regarding the third tropical wave. But the point is that we have three tropical waves that all have a possibility of developing if the conditions are right. Now, take a look at the European model. The European model isn't as lenient as developing a tropical cyclone. So if I were to continue to move forward, we do see that the moisture is moving eastward, and you see that this tropical wave does not even develop, as the European model just doesn't expect enough lift in the atmosphere to induce a tropical cyclone to develop just off of just north of South America. But you see that behind it there's a second tropical wave, a well-defined low pressure system does develop, it headed into the 5-day mark. It's still relatively weak, but it's at least a well-defined low pressure system that could have a possibility of developing. And the reason why is the lighter than usual surface level winds, because typically during the early part of the hurricane season, the main developed region, at least the westerly winds along surface, are a little bit too strong to create a well-defined low pressure system. Because of course when the winds are a little bit too strong, then it doesn't really allow for the storm to really have strong winds on all sides of the low pressure system, because the wind is just so fast. It's pretty much going against the winds on a southerly side. So as a result, it doesn't develop enough rotation when the winds along the surface are a little bit too fast. But if I were to show you guys the lower level winds right around the 10-meter mark, you're gonna see that the winds over the next several days will be fairly weak along the surface, where we see a very weak area of surface level wind. So this storm won't move necessarily fast, so it could easily organize itself as all areas surrounding the center of circulation will have a strong enough wind component to where enough convection will occur and enough convergence around center of circulation will occur for the potential of a tropical cyclone to develop. And not only that, the wind shear will be relatively light as well, so it won't be 100% shear free, because of course there will still be some wind shear. We do see that where we do see the lighter blues just off the African coast, so that certainly could inhibit it. Even a small amount of wind shear could inhibit it, but you see that for the most part wind shear is relatively light, so this does have a pretty good possibility of developing. Now, in terms of the humidity, at this point the GFS model is expecting the storm to pretty much stay in a pocket where it'll be moist enough for the dry air not to really inhibit this low pressure system. But you see that there's quite a bit of dry air just to the north of this pocket of moisture, so there easily could be the possibility that enough dry air entrains this low pressure system and completely dissolves it. So we definitely need to pay close attention to that as well, the amount of dry air over the next several days. According to the GFS model, the dry air should stay far enough north, but it's still at least fairly close in proximity to this low pressure system to where it could potentially be an inhibiting factor as this continues to move westward. But the GFS model is expecting a southerly wind component to keep the dry air north enough to where it won't affect this low pressure system, but it's still at least something to keep in mind. So based on this, you're probably wondering, well, if the wind shear is light, if the sea surface temperatures are warm enough, and if there isn't, at least based on what the GFS model is saying, a lot of dry air in the main developed region, why why aren't the computer models as lenient as developing this these tropical waves? Well, it's really because tropical cyclones take a while to really organize themselves. Just because everything is going in its favor does not mean that it could automatically just develop into a tropical cyclone, because of course you need the tropical cyclone a lot of times takes several days to really organize itself, really find an area where the pressure is the lowest and really begin convection around that center circulation, and that takes several days, especially since the sea surface temperatures aren't necessarily in the mid to higher 80s to promote a little bit more convection for the process of finding an area of center circulation to be faster. So it's still going to take several days before we even see a well-defined low pressure system, but it definitely does have a possibility of developing. Now, an inhibiting factor actually could be the fact that this could move a little bit too far south, because of course if a low pressure system just off the African coast moves a little bit too far south, then it'll have a weaker, the Coriolis effect will have a weaker impact on the low pressure system. So as a result, there's going to be less rotation surrounding the center circulation, which could certainly inhibit it. But so that's only another thing we have to keep in mind, that it needs to be far enough south to where it'll absorb a lot of that warmer water, but it can't be too far south to where the lack of Coriolis effect will impact the storm's strength. So still something to watch over the next several days. Still a high amount of uncertainty. Both computer models are at least taking defined low pressure system just to the west, the east of the Caribbean, and taking a track further southward. But both aren't necessarily developing a tropical storm, so we need to keep this in mind over the next several days. There could be a higher possibility, depending on how fast this tropical wave organizes itself, or these next few tropical waves. And of course, when we're talking about a tropical cyclone that's beyond the 4 to 5 day mark, it definitely becomes more uncertain. So we're just gonna need to wait and see how the conditions will play out into next week. But it's at least something to be aware of right around the northern portion of South America and the Caribbean islands. So keep that in mind. Now, taking a look at what the ensemble members are saying, we see that the GEFS model for this first tropical wave wants to take it further southward, and in fact does. There are a couple of spaghetti models that do want to strengthen it as it heads further westward past the Caribbean, and we do see that this third tropical wave does move a little bit further northward. That's definitely something to keep in mind, but it's still far more uncertain to forecast because it's further out into the future. So we're just going to need to wait and see with that one. But we do see that some of the spaghetti models want to strengthen it, so it's at least something to be aware of into next week. And taking a look at what the ECENS computer model is saying, we do have this first tropical wave that's taking the further southward track, and the model doesn't want to strengthen it. But we do see that there's two more tropical waves moving a little bit further northward where the computer model wants to strengthen it a little bit more. So it's definitely at least something to keep in mind over the next several days. We could have a tropical wave that could develop into tropical storm Bonnie. Now, in terms of my forecast of where tropical storm Bonnie could develop, and this pretty much applies to the first and second tropical wave, one of these could develop, and you see that I'm taking this straight towards the front-facing Caribbean islands, so you need to pay close attention to that. At least be aware of it, and as well as this is the northern coast of Venezuela, you need to pay close attention to a potential heavy rain threat. So make sure to keep that in mind, and I'll keep you guys updated over the next several days. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.